You are also the one who plans the first few miles. So remember these initial actions. What do you think are the first things you can do to start this learning? Where do you go outside of that driveway? Do you turn right or left? Do you go on the highway or the side road? Well, in the IDEP, we also look at the first steps to help you figure out what to do in these first few miles. I would highly suggest that you start your learning, you start learning that skill with one learning resource and one action step related to that learning resource. And to do this in the next 2 days, one of the hardest things with self-directed learning is getting started. So maybe you have that one YouTube video and you're going to watch it and try it out. Do it right then in the next 2 days. Once you try it, you'll have a clearer idea of what your next few miles, of what your next few steps will look like as well. Also remember that it's up to you to manage yourself. You need to make time to learn, to check in. You also need to make time and opportunities to practice what you learn. So in terms of making time, maybe you want to set aside time each week for at least a little bit of this structured learning. Going through a lesson in the MOOC, watching a video, looking at something in the TCB library, getting a little further, going through that SOP. Put time for that maybe in your calendar so that you have that quick check-in every week and you don't just say, oh, my learning needs to wait for something else. Also, for practicing what you learn, you need to be proactive about this. How are you going to apply your learning? If you don't apply it, you're not going to know what you're learning and what you need to learn. You'll just be stuck in the theoretical. So search out ways to apply what you're learning so that you can better understand what you do and do not know. Try to apply this in a real-world situation, but also weigh the risk. If you're learning sampling, you probably don't want to be the one person who works on sampling for that new study and no one else looks at it, right? So think about the risk involved when you're applying it, but also know that you need to look for those opportunities. Help others help you look for those opportunities on how to apply what you're learning. You're going to need to monitor yourself as well, and we'll talk about this in a second with check-ins. It's up to you to monitor yourself. Ask yourself, are you progressing? Are you progressing enough? And finally, you're going to need to motivate yourself. This is the biggest struggle. With self-directed learning, you are the one motivating yourself. You are the one deciding what I'm learning now has value for my job, so I'm going to do it. This motivation is going to be the huge struggle, up there with having time and making time for learning. Often learning with someone else, or at least having external check-ins with someone else to build this sense of accountability can be motivating, right? Think about what motivates you and try to build that in as much as possible in these first few miles so that you keep going with your self-directed learning. Remember that you are the one who decides when to check the map in self-directed learning. You are the one to ask yourself, how is it going so far? What can you improve? What's working well? What can you get more of? Are your learning goals still the most urgent, applicable, and feasible for what your work requires and what motivates you? If tomorrow everything becomes in-person trainings, I might stop learning about making videos because that is no longer the most urgent, most applicable, and most feasible for what my work requires. Checking in can come in many forms. Because this is self-directed learning, and because you are a person who can reflect on what you're learning and the value it has and how it's going, consider checking in with yourself. Again, maybe this goes on your calendar as well. Every week, every 2 weeks, you have just a little reminder on your calendar to check in with yourself, to look at your IDEP, to think about what you've learned that week, to think about struggles that you've had that week and what else you might need to learn to make the shifts and adaptations in your self-directed learning that you think will be valuable. Don't wait too long for this, because you are learning about how best you learn as you go along. So make these little adjustments along the way. You can also request to schedule a check-in with your TU lead or another learner. Remember, you're driving the car, but you're not alone. So you can reach out to your TU lead and say, I'd like to check in about the learning so far. I'd like to check in about the process or the tools, about what I'm doing, about the struggles I might be having. You can request that. You also can request to hold an already determined check-in with your TU lead. Remember, as part of the TCB process, we have quarterly check-ins and annual reviews. You can tell your TU lead, I feel like it might be time for us to do that quarterly check-in, or maybe it's a little early or a little late for our annual review, but I think it would be useful at this point. Please. Remember that you are also the one who knows when you've arrived. It's up to you to drive this process of evaluation. Do you think you've reached your learning goal? And how do you know that? Would it be helpful to identify an external way of evaluating your skill level? And is that feasible? So we can't all get degrees in every little thing we're learning. I don't have a video making degree, and it doesn't make sense to get one. But I can do things to evaluate my learning, both by myself and with the help of others. So how can I evaluate myself? Well, remember in the IDEP, we have this column to help you plan means of evaluation, and you can talk with your TU country lead about that. There's also this great cycle. This is your evaluation cycle, if you'd like. So you're learning things, and as you're learning them, you're also applying them. Remember, the more you apply and reflect on how that application went, the better you understand to what extent you are mastering the skill and what you need to learn more of or get better at or shift. So look for these application opportunities and talk to others about helping you find them and offering them to you. If someone knows you're learning such a skill and they have an opportunity for you to apply it, they might offer that opportunity to you. So really search out those application opportunities. When it comes to evaluating this skill, you want to know that you're at the skill level you want to be at and that you need to be at. How are you going to do that? Well, you're going to reflect yourself. How did that application go? How am I feeling with using this in my work? You're also going to ask others for feedback. It helps when you ask for feedback from others who know about this skill. This could be your TU lead looking over something that you've done and saying, yes, you've improved. Here's where I think your skill level is at for this skill. It could be others you work with who have an understanding of the skill, or who might even understand just more generally where things went well and where it was a bit more of a struggle. So ask for this feedback. Remember that we also talked about feasibility. So what are the feasible means of evaluation? And whenever you're in doubt about having an appropriate level in this skill, repeat a part of this process. Apply the skill again and evaluate it with the help of your own reflection and feedback from others. Remember that in self-directed learning, you are the one who decides when to keep going. This is not a class, this is not a tutoring engagement. This is your driving your learning, and a part of that is constant. So you decide if you should develop this skill even further, or maybe if you should shift to something else. Maybe there are other skills that are more urgent, more relevant, more motivating, things that you would like to focus on now that make more sense to focus on now. So instead of continuing on that same road, you're going to switch to another road and work on another skill. Maybe too, there's a new opportunity to learn something that wasn't there before. So just like the boot camp's coming up, there are certain skills that it makes sense to learn now in preparation for the boot camp. And once again, your journey keeps going. Your journey continues towards that learning destination, towards other learning destinations with your IDEP. So you want to adjust your IDEP as is necessary. Maybe it's during check-ins, maybe it's once you've arrived at a skill goal. Whenever it feels useful, adjust your IDEP. Maybe you're going from a different current capacity to a different targeted capacity on the same skill. Maybe you're working on another skill. Any combination that works for you because you are driving your learning in self-directed learning. So you set your learning goals. You can ask others for help. You identify resources and ask others to help you in identifying these resources. You set your initial actions, and maybe someone has ideas about what those might be, but you do them. You set the check-ins, be they with yourself or a request to check in with someone else, because that would be helpful for you at that point. You set the terms, the means of evaluation, and think about what is feasible and useful for you in evaluating that skill. You decide when to continue with that skill, when to shift to other skills. You drive your learning journey. So now it's time to take the wheel on your self-directed learning. I hope you have a great learning journey.